I turned 30, sitting alone at my own kitchen table, staring at a blank phone screen that never lit up, while a $2,300 charge from a restaurant I'd never been to hit our joint account at exactly 8:47 p.m. And the worst part wasn't that my husband forgot my birthday. It was that he spent it somewhere else and made sure I wasn't there. And just when I was trying to convince myself it was a mistake, his mother called me and asked, in a calm voice that made my stomach drop, "Emily, you're still at home, right?" Like she already knew the answer and was checking if I'd figured it out yet. And in that moment, something inside me cracked because this didn't feel like forgetfulness. It felt like I was being left out on purpose, like I was the only one who didn't know what was happening in my own marriage. So if this story speaks to your heart, only if it truly resonates with you, take a second to like, subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from, your city, your country, and what time it is for you right now, because I remember exactly what time it was for me when everything started to fall apart. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 30 years old, and this is the night I realized my husband didn't just forget my birthday. He was hiding something with his own mother, and everything in my family changed after that. But to understand how I got there, you need to go back to the morning of that day when I woke up expecting something small, something simple, anything that told me I still mattered, and instead I got silence, the kind that lingers in a house like a bad feeling you can't shake. I checked my phone before my eyes were even fully open. No message, no missed call, not even a late-night text I might have missed. Just the quiet glow of the screen reflecting back at me like I was invisible. And I remember lying there telling myself not to overreact, that Daniel had probably just gotten busy at work, that maybe he was planning something for later, something that would make up for the silence. But deep down, there was this weight in my chest that wouldn't go away, because Daniel wasn't the kind of man who forgot dates. He remembered everything, anniversaries, reservations, even the exact coffee order I changed 3 years ago. So this wasn't like him, and that's what scared me more than anything. I got up, made my own coffee, and tried to move through the day like it was normal, answering emails, folding laundry, pretending I wasn't checking my phone every few minutes, waiting for his name to appear. But it never did, and by the time the sun started to set, the house felt colder, quieter, like something had already shifted, and I was the last one to notice. And then at 8:47 p.m., my phone buzzed, and for a second, my heart jumped because I thought it was him, but it wasn't. It was a bank notification, and when I opened it, I saw the charge, $2,300 at a place called La Belle Étoile, a restaurant I'd only ever mentioned once in passing because it was too expensive, too fancy, the kind of place you go for special occasions, and I just sat there staring at it, trying to make sense of why my husband would spend that kind of money on a night he hadn't even bothered to acknowledge me. And that's when the phone rang, and his mother's name lit up on the screen, and I knew before I even answered that whatever was happening, she was already a part of it. I stared at Margaret's name on my phone for a full 3 seconds before answering, my fingers hovering like I already knew this call was going to confirm something I was not ready to hear. And when I finally picked up, her voice was calm, almost too calm, the kind of calm that felt rehearsed. "Emily," she said softly, "you are at home, right?" And the way she asked it was not like a question. It was like she was checking if I was exactly where she expected me to be, like I was following a script I had never agreed to, and my throat tightened as I said yes, forcing my voice to stay steady, and there was a pause on the other end. Not awkward, not surprised, just measured, like she was processing information she already had. And then she said something that made my chest feel hollow. "Good, that is good." And I froze because good for who, good for what, and why did it matter that I was sitting alone in my own house on a night that was supposed to mean something? I tried to laugh it off, to keep things normal, asking if she had talked to Daniel, pretending I did not already know the answer, and she hesitated just long enough to tell me everything. "He is busy tonight," she said, choosing her words carefully, and I looked down at the bank notification still glowing on my screen, at the name of the restaurant, at the amount that felt like a statement, not a mistake, and something inside me shifted from hurt to awareness, because this was not random. This was planned. And then she said, "Emily, I think it would be better if you stayed home tonight." And that was the moment everything stopped making sense in the way normal problems do. Because people do not say things like that unless they are trying to control what you see. and suddenly I could hear it, the intention behind her voice, the subtle urgency, the way she was not asking but guiding, like she needed me to stay exactly where I was, away from wherever Daniel actually was, and I felt this cold clarity settle in because if there was nothing to hide, she would not be doing this. I asked her why, keeping my tone light even though my heart was starting to pound, and she gave me a vague answer about it being late and me needing to rest, and it was almost convincing if I had not seen that charge, if I had not felt that silence all day. But I had, and now every word she said sounded like part of something bigger, something I was not supposed to piece together. I hung up a few minutes later with a polite goodbye, but my hand was shaking, and I stood there in my kitchen staring at the wall like it might explain what was happening. And then I looked back at my phone, at the restaurant name again, La Belle Étoile, and I remembered exactly where it was, downtown, about 20 minutes away without traffic. And for a second, I almost stayed, almost listened to her, almost convinced myself this was not worth the risk of being wrong. But then I thought about the way she said, "Good," about the way Daniel had disappeared without a word, about the way my birthday had been erased, like it did not matter, and I realized something that made my decision for me. If I stayed, I would never know, and if I never knew, they would keep deciding what I was allowed to see, and I was done being that person. So I grabbed my keys, did not bother changing out of the sweater I had been wearing all day, and walked out of the house with my phone still in my hand, pulling up directions as I got into my car, and as the engine started, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror, and I barely recognized the look in my own eyes. Not hurt anymore, not confused, but focused, because whatever I was about to find, I already knew one thing for sure. This was not about a forgotten birthday, and whatever was waiting for me at that restaurant was something they had both tried very hard to keep me away from. I drove faster than I should have, my hands tight on the steering wheel as the city lights blurred past me, every red light feeling like it was holding me back from something I already knew was going to hurt. But I could not stop, not now. Not after the way his mother tried to keep me home like I was a child who needed to be protected from the truth. And the closer I got to the restaurant, the more my mind tried to fill in the blanks, telling me it was probably exactly what it looked like, that Daniel was inside with another woman, celebrating something that was supposed to be mine, and I almost wished that was it, because at least that would be simple, painful but simple, something I could understand and confront. But deep down I knew this felt different, heavier, like something bigger was waiting for me. And when I finally pulled into the parking lot of La Belle Étoile, I just sat there for a moment, with the engine running, staring at the entrance, watching people walk in and out, dressed in clothes that said this was a place for important nights, for celebrations that mattered. And I felt this strange disconnect, because tonight was supposed to be mine, and instead I was standing outside it like a stranger. Trying to gather the courage to walk into my own reality, I checked my phone again. No messages, no calls, just that same charge staring back at me like proof that this was real. And then I turned off the engine, stepped out of the car, and walked toward the entrance with this quiet determination building inside me. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady, because whatever was inside, I needed to see it with my own eyes. I pushed the door open, and the warm light and soft music hit me immediately, along with the low murmur of conversations and the clink of glasses. Everything normal, everything calm, and for a second I felt almost ridiculous, standing there like I was about to uncover something dramatic, in a place that looked so ordinary. The hostess greeted me with a polite smile, asking if I had a reservation, and I shook my head, trying to keep my voice steady as I said I was just meeting someone. And as she turned to check the list, my eyes started scanning the room, table by table, searching for him, expecting to see Daniel sitting across from someone, leaning in the way he used to when he wanted to seem attentive, and my heart pounded harder with every second that passed without finding him, because the longer it took, the less this felt like what I had prepared myself for. And then I saw something that made me stop. Not him, not another woman, but a table near the back where two men in suits sat with folders open between them, one of them gesturing toward a stack of documents, and for a moment it did not register, until I noticed the familiar leather portfolio on the table, the one Daniel always carried to meetings, the one he never left behind, and my breath caught because that meant he was here, somewhere in this room, and I moved slowly, trying not to draw attention, my eyes scanning again, sharper now, more focused, and then I spotted him, not at the table I expected, not across from a woman, but standing near the bar talking to one of the men from the table. His posture relaxed, his expression calm, like this was just another business night, and I froze because there was no surprise in his face, no sign that he was somewhere he should not be, just quiet confidence, like he belonged there, like this was planned. And I watched as he nodded at something the man said, reached into his portfolio, and pulled out a set of papers, handing them over with a small, controlled smile that I had seen before, the one he used when he thought he was in control of a situation. And something inside me twisted because this was not an affair, this was something else entirely, something deliberate, something structured, and I took a step closer, just enough to hear fragments of the conversation, words like transfer, account, authorization, and my name. My name spoken casually, like it was just another line on a page, and in that moment the entire picture shifted, because he was not here forgetting me, he was here doing something that involved me, without me. And suddenly his mother's voice echoed in my head, telling me to stay home, telling me it was better if I did not see this. And I realized why, because if I had stayed, this would have happened without me ever knowing. And as I stood there in the middle of that restaurant, watching my husband sign something that clearly included my life in ways I did not understand yet, I felt the last piece of denial fall away, because whatever this was, it was not a mistake, it was a plan. And I was the only one it was built against. I did not move right away. I just stood there with my heart pounding in my chest, watching Daniel like I was seeing him for the first time, not as my husband but as someone I did not fully know, someone who could stand 10 feet away from me on my birthday and not even look in my direction while casually discussing something that clearly involved my life. And the more I listened, the clearer it became that this was not a last-minute decision. This was structured, rehearsed, something that had been building for a long time without me ever noticing. I took another step closer, careful, quiet, blending into the soft noise of the restaurant, and I heard one of the men say, "Once the transfer is complete, everything will be under the new structure." And Daniel nodded like he had already agreed to every detail, like there was no hesitation at all. And then the other man flipped a page and tapped a section with his pen. "We just need her signature here to finalize the joint asset conversion." And I felt something cold spread through my chest because I had never signed anything like that. I would have remembered. There was no way I would have agreed to something without reading it. And yet they were talking like it was already done, like my consent was just a formality. And Daniel did not correct him. He did not say they still needed to talk to me. He did not even pause. He just said, "That will not be a problem," in a tone so calm it made my stomach turn, because in that moment I understood something that made everything else fall into place. He was not planning to ask me. He was planning to make it happen without me fully understanding what I was signing. And suddenly, his mother's behavior made perfect sense. The call, the way she asked where I was, the way she told me to stay home. She was not protecting me. She was protecting the plan. And I felt this wave of anger rise up, not loud, not explosive, but sharp and focused, because they both thought I was still sitting in that kitchen, waiting for a message that was never coming, unaware that my entire life was being rearranged behind my back. I reached for my phone and pretended to scroll, angling it just enough to start recording without drawing attention. My hands steady now, my mind clearer than it had been all day, because if this was what they were doing, then I needed proof, not emotions, not assumptions, something real. And as I stood there, I watched Daniel sign one of the documents, his signature quick and confident, like he had done this many times before. And then he passed the pen back, leaning slightly toward the man as if to lower his voice. But I still caught enough to understand. "She trusts me," he said quietly. And those 3 words hit harder than anything else that night, because he was right. I had trusted him completely, without question, and he was using that trust like it was a tool, something to get what he wanted without resistance. And I felt this shift inside me, a line being drawn that I could not go back from, because this was not a misunderstanding. This was not a bad decision. This was deliberate, calculated, and it involved his mother just as much as it involved him. I watched as the men began organizing the papers, stacking them neatly, discussing next steps, timelines, and numbers that sounded too large to ignore. And I realized this was bigger than I had thought, Not just a simple transfer, but something that could change everything about my financial position, my security, my future. And the worst part was that I had been completely unaware until now. And as I stood there in that quiet, dimly lit restaurant, I made a decision that surprised even me. I was not going to confront him, not here, not like this, because if I walked up to that table right now, he would deny everything, twist it, explain it away in a way that made me question what I had just seen, and I could not afford that, not anymore. So instead, I stayed exactly where I was, watching, recording, listening, letting them think they were still in control. Because for the first time that night, I understood the truth clearly. This was not about catching him, this was about outplaying him, and if they thought I was still the woman sitting at home waiting for a birthday message, they were about to be very wrong. I stayed until they finished, until every document was stacked, every signature placed, every quiet agreement sealed with the kind of calm confidence that only comes from thinking you have already won. And I watched Daniel shake hands with both men like this was just another successful deal, like nothing about tonight was unusual, like my absence was not part of the plan but a condition of it. And when they finally stood to leave, I stepped back, blending into the movement of the room, making sure he did not see me, not yet, because the moment he realized I knew, everything would change, and I needed more than suspicion. I needed certainty, so I followed him at a distance as he walked out of the restaurant, his posture relaxed, his pace unhurried, like a man who had nothing to worry about, and that confidence told me everything I needed to know. He truly believed I was still at home, waiting, trusting, unaware, and that belief was his biggest mistake. I watched him get into his car and drive off, and I did not follow, not this time, because I already had enough to understand the direction this was going. Instead, I sat back down in my own car, replaying the recording, listening carefully to every word, every phrase, every detail I might have missed in the moment. And the more I listened, the clearer it became that this was not just about moving money. It was about control, restructuring assets, consolidating accounts, shifting ownership in a way that would leave me with less power than I had now, maybe even none at all. And I felt this sharp clarity settle over me, because this was not a single decision, this was a process, something that had been happening step by step while I was living my life, believing everything was stable. And then one sentence from the recording stopped me cold. One of the men had said, "Once she signs, the transition is immediate." And Daniel had replied, "She will sign." With absolute certainty, no doubt, no hesitation, like he had already decided how that moment would go. And I leaned back in my seat, staring at the dark windshield, because I knew exactly what that meant. He had something prepared, something he was going to present to me in a way that felt normal, harmless, maybe even beneficial, something I would not question. And in that moment, the entire picture shifted again, because this was not just about what had already happened. It was about what was coming next. And then my phone buzzed again, and this time I did not need to look to know who it was. I already felt it in the pit of my stomach, Margaret. And when I answered, her voice was softer now, almost careful. "Emily, are you still at home?" And I closed my eyes for a second, steadying myself before I answered, "Yes," because now I understood the game. And if she thought I was still there, then that was exactly where I needed to be. In her mind, in Daniel's mind, in their plan. Because the only way to stop something like this was from inside it. And she let out a quiet breath of relief on the other end, like she had just confirmed everything was still on track. "Good," she said again, the same word, the same tone. But this time I heard it differently, not as reassurance, but as confirmation that I was exactly where they wanted me. And she added, "Daniel will be home soon, do not worry." And that was almost enough to make me laugh, not because it was funny, but because of how calculated it sounded now, like she was guiding the timing, making sure everything lined up perfectly. And I realized then that she was not just aware of what he was doing, she was coordinating it, managing it, making sure I stayed in the right place at the right time so nothing went wrong. And I felt this strange calm settle over me, because the shock was gone now, replaced by something sharper, more controlled. And I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror again, at the woman who had walked into that restaurant thinking she might find an affair, and the woman who was sitting here now, holding evidence of something much bigger. And I barely recognized the difference, because now I knew the truth. Not just that I was being betrayed, but how carefully it had been planned. And as I started the car and headed home, one thought stayed with me. Steady and clear, they thought the next step would happen exactly the way they designed it. They thought I would sign whatever they put in front of me without question. And for the first time that night, I allowed myself a small, controlled smile, because they had no idea that the moment they handed me those papers would be the moment everything they planned would start to fall apart. Life feels quieter now. Not perfect, not untouched, but clearer in a way I never knew I needed. The kind of clarity that comes after something breaks and forces you to finally see what was always there. And some mornings I still sit at that same kitchen table with my coffee. But I am not waiting for a message anymore. I am not checking my phone for someone else to remind me I matter, because that night changed something deeper than just my marriage. It changed how I see myself, how I trust myself, and how I decide what I will and will not accept in my life. The papers he brought home the next day looked exactly the way I expected, clean, official, carefully explained, designed to sound harmless, and he smiled the same way he always did when he wanted me to agree without asking too many questions. But this time I did not rush. I read every word. I asked every question. And when he realized I was not the same woman who would sign without understanding, the confidence in his eyes shifted, just slightly, just enough for me to know I had taken back something he thought he already owned. And that was the moment everything truly changed. Not when I found out the truth, but when I decided I would no longer ignore it. Because the hardest part is not seeing betrayal. It is accepting it and choosing yourself anyway. I learned that trust is not something you give blindly. It is something that should be met with honesty. And when it is not, that is not your failure. That is your signal. Your intuition trying to protect you before the damage goes deeper. And if you are listening to this and something in your life feels off, something small that you keep explaining away, do not ignore it. Your instincts are not there to confuse you. They are there to guide you. Protect your name. Protect your finances. Protect your peace. Ask questions even when it feels uncomfortable. Read what you are asked to sign. And never let love become the reason you stop paying attention to your own reality. Because love without respect is not love. It is control dressed up to look familiar. And healing does not happen overnight. It is quiet. It is slow. It is choosing yourself in small ways every single day, until one day you realize you are no longer the same person who tolerated what once felt normal. I believe in my own way that God or the universe, whatever you hold on to, places moments like that night in our path, not to break us, but to wake us up, to remind us that our worth was never meant to be negotiated behind closed doors. And if you have ever felt overlooked, dismissed, or quietly pushed aside in your own story, I want you to know you are not alone, and you are not wrong for feeling that something needs to change. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop waiting for someone else to choose you and start choosing yourself. Thank you for staying with me through this, truly. Because stories like this are not easy to tell, but they matter, they connect us. They remind us that even in the most personal pain, there is something shared, something understood. And if this story meant something to you, you can share where you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. Because I remember exactly what time it was when my life shifted, and maybe this moment can be a quiet turning point for you too. My name is Emily Carter. I am 30 years old. And the lesson I want to leave you with is this. Never ignore what your intuition is trying to show you, because it is often the only voice telling you the truth before everything else does.